Mr. Speaker, thank you. And I thank my colleague from Maryland and from the Rules Committee for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, once again, this select committee is acting to fulfill a predetermined narrative. It seems increasingly clear that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to prolong this political process to distract Americans from the very real issues concerning this country. We have record high inflation, a flood of immigrants at our southern border, a workforce and supply chain crisis. And instead of working towards real ways we can combat these crises, or in fact even admitting that these crises exist, we are back here arguing if we should continue down a path of yet another partisan investigation of questionable motive and purpose. That said, there are several questions that need to be resolved before we can continue with this vote. The courts have found that the power rests with Congress over subpoenas into private individuals if they serve a legitimate legislative purpose. A legitimate legislative purpose would be issuing subpoenas to the leaders of the D.C. National Guard, the Sergeant-at-Arms, so that we can find out what gaps in communications and authorities need to be filled and find solutions to ensure this doesn't happen again. But have those been issued? Unfortunately not. Instead, House Democrats are continuing their witch hunt into President Trump and their political opponents that voted against the certification of the election, something that they themselves did just 4 years before. What information is intended to be gathered that would be useful for a legitimate legislative purpose? It seems the majority keeps moving the goalpost for what qualifies them to hold someone in contempt. This recipient has been cooperative, providing almost 9,000 pages of emails and other documents. But when the majority couldn't find what they wanted, the committee subpoenaed Verizon looking for other information from his personal phone, invading his privacy. There is no valid legislative purpose for this subpoena. And where does it stop? When will they be satisfied with the information they receive? They cannot continue punishing people just because they aren't getting the answers that they want. Furthermore, criminal contempt is not subpoena enforcement. This decision will still not achieve the stated intent of obtaining the records. The committee should seek a civil judgment and legally obligate a person to comply with the subpoena. But instead, my colleagues are going forward with this political ploy. Holding someone in criminal contempt is purely punitive. It leads me to wonder what the real mission of this committee is. Unfortunately, Speaker Pelosi and the Democrats made it clear early on that this committee and its investigation were predestined to be a sham when it tilted representation in favor of Democrats, rejecting 2 Republican members selected to serve on the commission by the minority leader. Mr. Speaker, I am deeply concerned about the precedent being set today because the majority is blinded by their own political agenda. I urge my colleagues to oppose this rule and the underlying resolution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman